Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about building a software team. So let's get into it. So the question was, hi Frederick, my company is trying to put together a software development team. How have you put together your team? Well, my specific team, so I've had a few, I've been part of a few teams, and I've led a few as well. And today I am leading a team, so I can just tell you sort of like how I usually put together a team, or like the way that I've found to be the most the one that I like the best. So usually it starts with one fundamental thing, and that is that your first hire needs to be the right developer. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's very simple. If you hire a software developer who is the sort of person who, it doesn't have to be someone who is like a specialist or like the most senior person in the world or so forth. It just has to be somebody who, number one, can do the job, who can produce the results, and number two, has actual vision and maturity and so forth, and knows what it means to work with other people and knows how to structure things, structure a good work process. This is what the tech lead is supposed to be about. Unfortunately, this is very hard to find. And I'm aware of how hard it is to find, because unfortunately I have to find these people as well, apart from the coding and all that stuff. And it's so hard. But you need to find someone who is at least very close to that, because once you have such a person in the team, then then that person becomes like the kingpin, or like the top of the node tree. That person should ideally be now responsible for setting the technical roadmap for the team. In other words, create a set of drafts of, like, you just talk to the stakeholders, let that person figure out together with the stakeholders, okay, what is the vision, what is the product heading, where is the product heading, what is it going to be about, etc., etc., and then use that person's experience to define technical roadmaps, like everything from what tech are we going to use, what, or maybe you're inheriting this code base, like what are the like main issues with the code base, how are we going to fix them, what are our thoughts on like like sustainability, all of these sorts of things, right? That's what this person should do to start off with, and then of course start working on stories by themselves a little bit, so that they get familiar with the code, or like gets like a base structure up. Because I usually say that there are so-called bottleneck stories. A bottleneck story is a story that only one person can effectively work on at any given time. You can't multitask it, or like you can't divide up the work on multiple people. And that's a key thing. Usually, just creating the repository, or like creating the first setups and so forth, that's a one-person problem usually. And so you don't have to add more people until those basics are in place, because it would be made no sense. The others are just going to sit there and wait until that happens. So that's the first thing that you're going to need in order to make a software team. Then after that, it's time to hire some people. And now it's vital that you hire people that are a complement to the first person, the tech lead, or the person who's going to be more or less in charge of managing the team and the technical roadmap and stuff like that. To be that person's team needs to be somehow a good fit for that individual. The reason why this is very important is, and why you should never ever allow anybody who is not a professional grade software developer to do your hiring for you, or for that team, or whatever, is that if you hire the wrong person, it can sow dissent. If you hire the wrong person, it might be like that you lose the tech lead or something like that in a critical moment when you can't really afford to lose that person. Because if you're doing everything right, you should be able to lose that person later on. But in the start of things, no, this person is way too important. So everything that is needed to make that person happy at the early stages has to happen to get the thing rolling right. So that person should ideally always have a fairly strong, if not final, say on who gets hired and who does not get hired to their team. This is where this, once again, you're putting a lot of faith in this one individual in the beginning of things, but that's how everything works, guys. That's why I tell people it's less important how fast you scale. It's more important that you get the right person for the scale up than it is to just scale, because if you scale wrongly, it's going to cripple you. But if you scale with the right people, it's going to be very sustainable and very lucrative for you. That's my experience usually. This is what the FAANG companies are doing, just in case we didn't know that. Anywho, so that's number 2. Hire people who are a complement, and it depends on the person. In some cases that person is going to be very senior, or ideally it should be someone who is fairly experienced. So then, depending on the work that they're going to do, you might hire a few mid-levels, or you might hire a junior here and there, or you might hire other seniors. It really very much depends on the complexity of the work that is going to be done and the person who is the tech lead. Once you have decided to start hiring people, that person now needs to understand one very specific thing, and this is very key. That person has to understand that it is that person's responsibility now to create well-working documentation and onboarding processes and knowledge sharing strategies. The reason for this is because when you scale a company, you will find that key people get to be silos of information, and the higher up the food chain that person goes, the more people will need their opinion and thoughts and knowledge about everything. And the worst possible situation for a software company is to have one person who knows everything, and they're booked in 100 meetings every single day. You can get 15 minutes in a month off their time to do the thing that you need to unblock your team. And I've seen this happen in practically every company. And it always comes down to the same thing. That person has failed to delegate their responsibility and knowledge down to other people. Without that knowledge sharing, you have a domain expert, or like you have someone who's too much. You become too critical to the company, and that is very dangerous. Because the companies, every single request that comes into the team, well, it's going to have to be you who fixes it, because the other people don't know how to do it. And that's why you have to have very strong focus within the team on knowledge sharing and on documentation of processes. I don't advocate just having documentation for the sake of documentation, but you need to document guides for how do you get access to all the systems, how do you do the common tasks, etc., etc. This sort of stuff that person probably does without even thinking about it, that needs to be written down so somebody else can do it instead of them, and then that person needs to delegate. The 2 biggest tips I can give you to make this work really well is, number 1, have a reoccurring story, like a monthly thing, where you review your documentation every month. That way you just basically create a new story every month saying that, okay, go through all of the documentation that we have, read through it, make sure that all the links are working, make sure that all the information is sort of correct, and then just add your names with the date saying that I have reviewed this now, it is still accurate, or something like that. This works extremely well to keep the documentation that you actually do have up to date and relevant, so that it can be used on a ideally daily basis. If you do this correctly with the onboarding process, guys, I've been able, these days it's actually funny, it does not matter how many people they send my way. It takes no time for me to train them. I have my team up and running within a day. Every single one of them. It doesn't matter what experience level they are. We take a first initial talk, and then there is enough documented information in an onboarding process with screenshots of images for specific systems and so forth, all the things that they need in order to set up their own workstation completely by themselves and start working on their first story completely by themselves. And it doesn't matter if it's a senior or a junior, it works the same way, and that is something that is a godsend when you want to scale up. The other part, as I was mentioning, is that you need to make sure that this person delegates domain knowledge, and the best way to do that is what I like to call the support person. A support person is a role within the team where you rotate the responsibility of doing ad hoc tasks or things that come into the team that doesn't necessarily have to be done by the tech lead. It can be everything from granting access to the system or checking a bug or whatever, and it's like being on call within the team, within the work hours. And that way you actually create an organic way for that like that tech lead who does everything to go from being the only person who knows how to do all this stuff to just being one of the people who could do it. Because what you want is to get that person to a point where the only thing you really need that person for is to be in the meetings, apart from like doing all the other stuff. And that person should also make sure that he or she explains very clearly, like to create like some type of overview of, okay, this is the technical roadmap, these are all the stories that we've created for like future projects and so forth, and this is the direction. Because when that has been done, that person can hand off all that information to somebody else. And I mean, in my team, that's exactly how it works. I've actually said to my guys, I know for a fact that if I were to be hit by a bus today, the only thing that would happen is that one of you guys would have to start being in the meetings. But I know for a fact that you will be able to handle that, because all the stories and like all the work that the team has planned for quite some time, it's all written down. You've already seen, I've shown you this general architecture and sort of the standard tools and the ways we do work here. I feel completely fine, and I could give this job to a junior software developer, and sure, they might not be as well equipped to deal with stakeholders and all of that stuff, but they will be able to hold the reins until somebody more experienced comes in and takes over. So what I want you to take away from this is that, from my perspective, the way to build a well-working software team starts with one individual. It's just in the beginning of things, it's the most important individual, and it's the first hire. The first hire needs to be an individual who has enough experience to know how to set up a project according to like some type of requirements. Usually you're looking for a person who is mature enough to understand that, you know, your personal stack might not be the best fit here, so that you can trust that they're actually going to have this idea that, okay, there might be juniors, there might be seniors who will work on this project, so let's pick a stack or like a setup that is fairly straightforward in the beginning but still meets the technical needs and like things like that. That's the person that you're looking for. That person is the first and most important person. Once you get that person should be involved in all the like the hiring and so forth, because you're looking for people that complements that individual to start off with. And then lastly, that person, once the team starts growing, needs to make sure that he or she is documenting onboarding processes and like these daily tasks, things like going to certain systems and fixing certain things or so forth, or having certain responsibilities. Basically, that person should, in an ideal case, figure out, how do I do my job, and take the pieces that are very important for somebody else to know how to do, and make a checklist of ways of doing that. We have an entire like docs folder with guides in the source code. It works really, really well. And then the other part is to make sure that they write down like the technical roadmap, sort of like where things are going, and have a few meet and greets with the other developers, so that they know roughly what the direction of the project is. And then of course that they need to have some type of knowledge sharing, and the best way to knowledge share is not through meetings where somebody explains one thing here and there. It is about giving responsibility to other people. And by having the support person or a rotating support person who is responsible for doing the job of the tech lead on a weekly basis or something like that, you're making it so that every person in the team can run the team if necessary. And that is the ideal setup. I've only had massive successes with this way of working. Have a great day.